How do you go from this to this without having to study interior design or break the bank? Making a space look good is a skill, but like most skills in life, it often doesn't come naturally at first. For the past few months, I've been stuck at home a lot more due to some medical issues, but in my boredom, I stumbled across a YouTube channel called Open Space. And basically with every video I watched, all I could think was, why do these places just look so good? But the more I looked for answers, the more I started paying attention to other spaces as well. Apartments, coffee shops, and even showrooms. I always used to think that the only way to make a space look good was to either throw money at it or get an interior designer. But nowadays, you can actually get very far on your own. So whether you're moving into a new space or you're looking at just upgrading your current one, I think I might have a little bit of advice. After spending the past few months diving more into the world of interior design, these are 4 of the big things you can do to make your space look great. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1, pick a style. This is probably the easiest and quickest way to make any space feel more aesthetic. Before you buy something or move something or change anything, just first decide, what do you actually want this space to feel like? Most of us, when we decorate, we tend to do it in the same way we would sort of get dressed when we're in a rush. You sort of just grab for anything that looks sort of okay. A random desk here, a chair there, maybe a print you saw online, but then put it all together and it all just feels a bit random because it is. Picking a style fixes that. It gives the whole space a kind of shared language that makes it easier to decide what belongs and what doesn't. Plus, you don't need to go deep into interior design theory, you just need a direction. So I want to highlight 3 styles in particular that have become quite popular over the past few years and that are generally kind of hard to mess up and will give you a very strong aesthetic result, or at the very least a decent base that you can sort of personalize and customize going forward. And what's nice about these styles is chances are high you already have things that fit into these styles, and if you don't, it's usually not that expensive to fill the gap. First up is mid-century modern, and it is probably the most accessible of the 3. This often also comes with earthy accents like burnt orange or olive green against a pretty neutral base. It feels very timeless because it draws on natural materials and proportions that our brains just kind of feel very comfortable with. And if your space already has any wooden furniture or warm tones, you're probably closer to this than you think. Then there's what I'd loosely call the modern tech aesthetic. If you spend any time on setup channels or gaming content, you already know exactly what this looks like. White everything, clean surfaces, and when done well, it looks crisp and almost futuristic. The trap is that the lighting can tip very easily from accent into overwhelming. You want to try and stick to pretty neutral lighting in general. And thirdly, there's Japandi. It's a blend of Japanese and Scandinavian design, and honestly, it might be the most forgiving style on this list because its whole philosophy is basically about doing less. Natural materials, muted tones, intentional empty space. Where mid-century modern has warmth and character, Japandi is a lot quieter. It has a bit of a cooler palette, some lighter woods like ash or pine, and generally just makes use of a lot of natural linen textures. The Japanese side of it brings in this idea that empty space isn't something that you have to fill, it's actually part of the design. And if your instinct is to keep things minimal, this is probably your direction to go. Each of these styles are essentially just a set of rules, and counterintuitively, I think it actually gives you a little bit more freedom because it makes it much easier to figure out what fits and what doesn't. So when you're looking at a piece and thinking, should I get this or should I add this to the space, you can kind of look at the little set of rules that come with your style and then very easily decide, yes, this can go in, or no, let's rather pass on this. And you don't even have to stick to just one. There are great examples out there of people blending these styles to pretty great effect. Personally, my space leans a bit more into a mix of Japandi and mid-century modern with a few black accents as well that I've kind of gotten more from the tech space. So you can blend it in a way that fits your personal taste. but just sort of pick a direction, even if it's just loosely, and you'll see a big difference from the get-go. Next up is color. A while back, I made a video on how to take photos that don't suck, where I spoke about how when it comes to color, you really want to try and keep it simple in the sense of not having a bunch of colors going all at once. Your first tone is often your dominant tone. Usually it's determined by your biggest surfaces like your walls, your floors, or your large furniture in that space. Then a secondary tone usually comes through in smaller furniture and textiles, and finally one or two accent tones, which often pairs up with your decor pieces. As for which exact tones to go for, you can actually find a lot of inspiration on a website like Coolers that offers simplified and cohesive color palettes. Personally, I tend to rotate between light and dark browns as my dominant tones, with grey and black often coming in as secondary tones, and then accented by bits of red, white, and sometimes even a tiny bit of green. Every piece either sits within that palette or earns its place as a deliberate accent. Some palettes I've also come across that I think look really good include green, brown, and beige, as well as a white and orange combo. And often when it comes to colors, if you're looking at your space and it just doesn't quite feel right, look for the things that are kind of sitting on their own. Usually there's just one or two objects with the color that doesn't fit the rest of the palette that ends up doing most of the damage, and often just removing them or getting it in a different color actually sort of fixes the whole problem entirely. But once you've picked your style and you've picked your color palette, we now need to figure out how to make it personalized, because otherwise it looks good but otherwise a bit impersonal and maybe even boring. It still has to feel like it's your space, like it's a lived-in area. Which brings us to point number 3. Personality. A golden skull sitting on top of a stack of Brandon Sanderson novels, a small collection of Porsche paraphernalia, a nostalgic trading card accenting a vintage globe. These are all examples of personality pieces, specifically my personality pieces. Personality pieces are pieces of decor or just things in general within a space that make it feel a bit more lived in, like someone actually inhabits this space as opposed to just being some kind of sterile showroom. Personality comes from the unique objects you choose to display, but also how you choose to display them. These are often not the most premium interior design pieces. Sometimes they are literally just printed photos, but they're things that you generally care about, and these are items that have stories and meaning behind them. But when it comes to these personality pieces, it can be a slippery slope from some kind of decor that's interesting and just general clutter. And so what's often important in this regard is how you choose to display it. A book just thrown on a desk is clutter. 4 books stacked on top of each other with a sculptural object on top, that's a display piece. So here are a few rules that make this easier. First, group things in odd numbers. 3s and 5s feel more natural to the eye than 2s and 4s. Next, vary the height within a grouping. So something flat, a mid-height object, and something taller than the rest. That variation creates a visual intrigue and depth. And lastly, make sure at least some of what you display actually means something to you. It should feel unique and really to your taste. If someone walked into your space and they couldn't tell anything about you based on what they saw, then that's maybe something to think about. But as much as you want a space to look good and you want a space to look like it's yours, you do also want that space to work for you, which brings me to the 4th and final point: functionality. And this is ultimately what is going to separate a space that just looks good on camera to a space that actually works in your day-to-day life. So ideally everything in your space should either look good or it should serve a purpose, but ideally you want it to do both. If you start finding things that do neither, that is going to cause your space to fall apart pretty quickly. That's generally why I'm quite picky when it comes to a lot of the tech I use. Yes, it should do what it's designed for, but it should also look good and it should add to the beauty of the space. I also find that it's just much more enjoyable to use items that have a good blend of functionality and aesthetics. Shelves and storage items are also great examples of this. It provides a functional solution to the problem of where do I put my stuff, but it can also be good looking in and of itself and actually complement the items that you are trying to store or display. There's a very big difference between a space that continues to look good as you work in it or live in it, compared to a space that looks good when you've tidied it up, but once you actually start trying to do things in that space, it quickly just becomes cluttered and messy again. So think about your space in terms of friction. What do you use every day, and is it actually easy to get to? What's creating visual noise that you've just learned to kind of tune out? Look at things like cable storage and creating a home for random use items, as opposed to having a bunch of cables and items that just sort of randomly float around. Generally speaking, every object in a space should earn its place there. If you find that you constantly have things that are just getting in the way and that maybe don't even look good in the first place, maybe they're just taking up room and you can put them somewhere else. So to bring it all together, how do you make a space look good? Well, pick a style and let it filter every other decision. Keep the color palette simple so that the things that matter actually have room to breathe, and fill it with objects that actually mean something to you. But at the end of the day, make sure everything in the space is earning its place. And I think you might find that your space turns into a place that you actually want to be in much more than usual. But all that being said, I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.